All right. Hello and welcome to our Estate Professional Spotlight and Q&A series. My name is Nordis Forcade-Martin. I am the founder and CEO of Florida Probate Partners, a real estate team that specializes in working with probate attorneys, professional guardians, and trust officers and helping them sell the real estate involved in their cases. During this series, we delve into the intricacies of probate and estate planning, and we do this with the goal of educating our community by showcasing the professionals who are problem solvers in the arena. As serious as this topic is, we like to bring light to these conversations, so do expect to have some fun. Welcome to our show. All right, so we have the pleasure today of having Attorney Rudy Mayor with us. And Rudy, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi. First of all, thank you for having me. I am a partner at DiPietro Partners, where I specialize in trust and estates litigation. We have cases all over the state of Florida, and we're here to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Rudy. We appreciate having you. So we're going to go right into the topic of tell us more about what are the common grounds for contesting a will or trust?
Yeah, so there's really three common grounds that you see a lot for challenging the validity of a will or trust in the state of Florida. The first one is if the will or trust fails to comply with the formalities of execution. And essentially what that means is that it needs to be signed correctly, right? So in the case of a will, for example, the individual that's signing the will needs to sign it in the presence of two witnesses. And those witnesses also need to sign the document in the presence of each other. So it's sort of like a ceremonial thing where everyone just has to be in the same room at the same time, watching each other sign to make sure that this is done correctly. You don't need a notary, although it's good practice to have a notary, but that's essentially what's required for a will. The requirements for a trust are similar, but if you don't comply with those formalities, it can be challenged. Now, typically, when you involve a lawyer and a lawyer drafts a will or trust, and they're involved with the execution process, they're usually going to get it right? So typically, when you have a lawyer involved, you're not going to have a challenge based on that. The second ground that's very common is lack of capacity, right? And that's pretty straightforward, but it basically means that the person doesn't understand what they're signing, right? But to have capacity in the state of Florida is actually a very low bar. A person with dementia can have sufficient capacity to execute a will. As long as they understand who they are, what they're doing, what assets they have, and have a general understanding of how a will works, they're going to have sufficient capacity to execute a will. So that's really for those cases where you have someone with really advanced dementia or some sort of brain damage that prevents them from executing a valid will. And then the last one, which is probably the most common one, is undue influence. And a person, even if they have capacity, can be unduly influenced. And that's basically when someone like forces you or coerces you into signing something that you really don't want to sign and you feel like you have no choice.
Got it. Okay, so can you walk us through the typical process of contesting a will or trust?
Yeah, so uncommon, similar to other cases, you have to file a complaint. And usually you're going to file that in the probate court in the county where the individual who passed away lived. But it's very important to get a lawyer involved very early on because these kinds of cases have a lot of deadlines and statutes of limitations, which are very easy to blow. For example, to contest a will, you have to challenge it within 3 months of getting a notice of administration. If you don't do it after getting the notice of administration within the 3 months, you can't challenge it. For a trust, it's 6 months from the time that you get a notice of trust. So the deadlines are very unforgiving. So it's very important that you get a lawyer involved very early on. My recommendation to clients is to file something that's known as a caveat. And it's a simple one-page document, costs $40 to file. And you file it in the county where the person passed away. And basically, when you file a caveat, you make sure that you get notice, regardless of whether you're in the will or the trust or not. You get notice before any will or trust is admitted to probate. And that ensures that you have an opportunity to object to the validity of the will before it's admitted to probate. And you also get a chance to object to the appointment of a personal representative before they're appointed. Because once a will is admitted or once the personal representative is appointed, it's very tough to challenge the will or trust. So you want to make sure that you get it early on. And a caveat, it's a good trick to know, to be able to make sure that you don't blow those deadlines or those statutes of limitations.
And Rudy, just to be clear, because we have our audience may be the consumer, right? Or it may be another attorney that doesn't practice in this area. So just to be clear, when you say that you advise your clients to include a caveat, what client are you referring to? Are you referring to the client that may have had someone pass away? Who are you referring to?
Yeah, any person who has had a loved one pass away, who has any doubt about whether there's been a last minute change to the will or trust, if they're concerned whether they were removed from the will or trust, I would suggest that they file a caveat. And that way, regardless of whether they're in or out, they get notice and they have an opportunity to object.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying that. What are the key elements that need to be proven in a will contest case?
Yeah, so for taking the most common example of undue influence, you basically have to prove coercion and duress, and it has to be to such a point and such an extent that the person basically doesn't have a choice, right? You don't have to have a gun to your head, but you have to prove that that person felt like they had no choice but to sign that document that they didn't want to sign. Now, that may be very difficult to prove. So something that's unique in undue influence cases is that you can actually shift the burden of proof. And that doesn't happen in many cases, but it can happen here. And there's a case out there called Carpenter. And it basically says that if someone benefited substantially from the will change or the trust change, and that person was in a position of trust or confidence, like if the elderly person was dependent on them and relied on them, and number three, if they were active in procuring the will or trust, then you can actually shift the burden of proof. And that person is going to have to come up with a good explanation for why that will or trust was changed under suspicious circumstances. And so in those cases, that Carpenter case, it lays out a number of red flags. Okay. And the red flags include, for example, if the person who benefited was talking to the lawyer, giving instructions to the lawyer rather than the person who's changing the will, if that person was involved and giving instructions, if that person was a witness or knew the witnesses, then those are common red flags that you want to look out for a potential undue influence case.
Got it. Okay. So what are some of the biggest challenges you face when handling a will or trust contest, not constant?
Yeah, so the main challenge that my clients have is the fact that at the beginning of an undue influence case, actually before it, like right after the person passes away, they don't know what happened. They don't know whether something was changed. They don't know whether they're in the will or not. And so the biggest challenge is trying to build the case from the ground up. And sometimes you kind of have to go off your gut instincts as to whether you think there was any wrongdoing or undue influence. So a lot of times people are really shooting in the dark. They have to file a complaint because they feel like something bad happened. But then it's through the process of discovery, through depositions and interrogatories and requests for productions and subpoenas, that you have to really build the case from the ground up. So that's the main challenge. You have to build the case from the ground up. You have to take the depositions of the doctors to see if the person was vulnerable. You have to take the depositions of the lawyer who drafted the will the witnesses, to really connect all the dots and see, hopefully you have a smoking gun. Usually you don't, but if you connect the dots, you can put together a very, a good undue influence case. The challenge is that building a case from the ground up can be very expensive. And sometimes you just don't know how the evidence is going to shake up. So that to me is the number one challenge that clients face when bringing these kinds of will challenges.
Got it. So what are some of the more rewarding aspects of practicing in the area of probate and trusts?
Yeah, so us lawyers need to remember sometimes that, all the time really, that when you're dealing with these cases, you're dealing with someone that's a family member who's passed away, so you're dealing with a lot of emotions, relationships, sometimes people that didn't talk to each other that now, they're put into this situation, which is very stressful. And so, the most rewarding thing to me is being able to give these clients like closure. A lot of times they have to file a lawsuit and they don't really have time to grieve, their family member's loss. And it's only at the end of the process, at the end of the litigation, that the person can really like sit back, and really think, grieve the loss of a parent or another loved one, because the deadlines are so quick. You have to do it so quickly that there's really not a lot of time for that. So, one fun thing that I remember, a client, we had settled the case, and then there was this one thing that he wanted from mom's house that, he always remembered. It's something that reminded him of her, and it was this painting. And in the end, he was like, if I had this painting, to remember my mom by, it would make a whole, the whole difference. It would make a huge difference. And so in the end, we got him this painting. And it was something that wasn't valuable or anything. It was just something that his mom did. And he, it's something that reminded him of her. So it was kind of funny. After the case finished, he like made this bobblehead of me. You see the resemblance. And I'm holding the painting that that his mom made, and that we got him for him in the case.
Awesome.
So it's it's those. Yeah. And in the bottom it says, "I won this for my favorite client." So it's it's those things, right? Being able to kind of, full circle, being able to give family members closure, after a difficult loss.
Yeah, a lot of times it's not even so. It's a lot of times it's not about the monetary value. It's more about the emotional value, right? So
yeah.
What an awesome story, though, that you were able to get that for him, and I can totally see how that's rewarding. Rudy, thank you so much. I know that this is a tough subject, and we are, even though I'm practicing in real estate, you're practicing in law, we're both practicing in an area that is very sad oftentimes, and where family dynamics, I know you and I had a conversation where family dynamics are not the best, yet in many of these cases, the most rewarding part is getting closure, and sometimes even families getting to reconcile, and you being part of that is awesome. So thank you again for the information. And here's the lightning round, right? The part where we get to have some fun. Rudy doesn't know what these questions are, but they're just fun questions to get to know the human Rudy, in addition to now we know the attorney Rudy. So first question, if you can instantly teleport to any place in the world right now, where would you go?
Oh, wow. I would love to go back to Napa. It's where me and my wife got engaged, and we have amazing memories there. It's a beautiful place. If you ever been there, you don't even need to be a wine lover. Like, you will become a wine lover, because just going through the different estates and the vineyards and learning about how the process works and all the work that goes into it, it's just it's a beautiful place. Also great spas. Every hotel has a really good spa. So if I could teleport, I'd probably go there and definitely take my wife.
That's awesome. Actually, that's one of the places we visited. My husband and I visited during our honeymoon. We did a San Fran to Vegas road trip, and we made it a point to stop in Napa right before stopping in. We went to San Fran and then we went to Napa. We did one of
Hmm.
those trips, but it was awesome, and we did end up becoming club members, even though we don't like wine. We weren't fans of wine, and that lasted like 3 years later, like us accumulating wine, and we realized, okay, we need to stop this. But yeah, it is a beautiful place, very peaceful there.
Yeah, you always
What's the
leave there
weirdest?
with cases of wine,
I know, I
and
know.
then you
And
gotta
so
start giving them out.
we were smart about it. We did a bus. I think we took the bus there, so because we knew we were going to be testing wine, so we're like, we're not going to do
Yeah,
that.
it's a good idea.
We're going to stay safe. So, what's the weirdest thing you've ever Googled?
Oh God. I'm constantly Googling stuff when I'm watching TV. Like I'm watching a show or something, like I'm constantly like fact checking things. So I don't
Uh
know that
huh.
it's weird, but like I'm like, always like half paying attention. Like, is that true? Like, is that so I mean, I'm constantly Googling. It's a very useful tool also in law as well. You'd be shocked to see what you can learn from just a quick Google search. But yeah.
Actually, that's a perfect segue to this question that I was not going to ask, but it's a fun question. So, what is the most ridiculous fact that you know?
The most ridiculous fact.
Since
Oh
you've
my
Googled all
god.
these things, right?
Yeah, I mean, um I went to school in Washington D.C., and so I feel like and I had this class on George Washington. So I know a lot of ridiculous facts about history. Um I don't know. Um I don't know. I don't know any. I'm
Nothing
sure I
comes to
come
mind that
across
is
a lot of
ridiculous.
ridiculous. Yeah, nothing comes to mind. I mean, there are a lot of ridiculous things out there. Um, and when I watch Jeopardy, I'm always kind of like, how do these people like have the time,
To
to
learn all of that,
remember?
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. That's a
Yeah.
good question. I'll have to put a footnote on
We'll
it.
get we'll have a second round of this, and we'll ask you that question again, and we'll get an answer from you. So, last question is, what is the best piece of advice anyone has ever given you?
Oh wow. To me, it's always remember your roots, and always remember where you came from. I grew up in Hialeah, Florida, born and raised, a public school system, graduated from Hialeah High School. And it was one of my teachers there she was actually my mock trial coach. I had a law class. So I knew pretty early on this is what I wanted to do. And when she, the last week of senior year of high school, she said, never forget where you came from. Never forget that you are a T-bred from Hialeah High. And never forget where your parents came from. And that's something that I hold very, near and dear to my heart. Everything I do is, I think, informed and influenced by how I grew up and my upbringing. So that's very important to me and very, dear to my heart.
That is awesome. She instilled humility without knowing it, that she was with that advice. That's awesome. Rudy, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your expertise and getting allowing us to have some fun with it. How can our followers, our audience, other attorneys reach you other
Yeah,
than
so you
Googling you?
can. Yeah, other than Googling, yeah, so our you can find us at ddpalaw.com. Our main office is here in downtown Fort Lauderdale, right on Las Olas. So feel free to stop by, and you can always email me, Rudy at ddpalaw.com, or call us at 954-712-3070.
Awesome. Thanks again, Rudy. We'll do this again soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.